Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's MediaWorks Masterclass. I'm really excited today to be joined by colleagues from Umbraco. We'll do some introductions shortly, but we're going to be talking everything the future of personalised digital experiences. So we're going to be talking about how do we future-proof your user experience. Such an important part of everything that we do focuses as a digital agency, driving traffic to websites. We've then got to think about how do we actually match up that user experience. So I'm really excited to talk through all of that today and talk about why personalisation is such an important aspect of everything that we now need to be thinking about from a user experience perspective. So I do have a jam-packed sofa today. This is one of the busiest sofas that we've got. So yeah, it's going to be good fun. So for those that don't know, my name's David Norris. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at MediaWorks, and I'm also the host of the MediaWorks Masterclass. Johnny, I'll come to you first. So we've got Johnny Pears.
Yes, I'm Johnny Pears. I'm the User Experience Director at MediaWorks. My role sits in between our data and insights teams and our development team, and I manage a team of UX and UI designers to ultimately look at the end-to-end digital experience.
Fantastic, Johnny. So we've also got, as I say, we do these quite regularly, sort of our partnership masterclasses. So we've got one of our key partners is Umbraco, and we'll learn a bit more about Umbraco as we go through today. But would you like to give yourself an introduction, Jay?
Sure thing. Great to be here, guys, and thanks for the invitation. My name's Jake. I am a partner manager for the Umbraco UK and Ireland team. Umbraco being the leading .NET open source CMS, but we have a range of sort of add-on products to make that open source CMS experience more effective, more efficient. That includes lots of personalisation, so we've got lots of clients to talk through in terms of case studies and best practices today.
Fantastic. And Aaron?
That's a really hard introduction to follow. I'm Aaron, also a partner manager from the UK and Ireland at Umbraco. And yeah, similarly, we've been focused a lot on personalisation in the last year, so it's a really good chance to come out, talk to you guys about it, kind of give a few insights as well from our side and what we're seeing as well in the market.
Fantastic. So again, I always say we're an independent agency. So Umbraco, one of our partners, we're always thinking about what's right for the customer, but we're really excited to find out about what are the potentials and where do we need to head from a user experience perspective. So I think we're talking here primarily about personalised digital experience and why personalisation matters, Johnny. So I think when we broke this down and when we were having the conversation prior to this session, guys, I think we broke that down into really three key areas around why does personalisation matter?
Yeah, and I think even when you go back to the title of this, the future of personalised experience is a little bit of a red herring because personalisation is now.
Yeah.
It's an aspect that customers expect in every digital experience. And that is not always set by you, it's not set by your competitors, but actually it's set by all digital experiences that somebody may go through, whether we've labeled a few there in Netflix and Shopify and Amazon. That will then be expected of your digital platforms. And I think, again, it's people don't want generic experiences coming to a brochure site that is the same information every time they visit. What is the return value to that? What is that adding in terms of a long-term value for me? Then really what we want to see is layers that when I come back, it's more hyper-focused on the things I want to see and the information I want to understand. And as we know, personalization drives growth, and that's not even thinking of just the digital experience. But we know that through marketing, performance marketing. When ads are more personalized, we know we get higher engagement. So why don't we then just immediately think digital experience needs to go the same direction? And I think this is really important because when people start to think around personalization and the what we can do with someone's data, it's almost there's a nervousness around how we engage with someone's data to start driving that, but actually we can see that consumers expect it, so we need to be utilizing, capitalizing on the data to actually drive more engagement with us, more engagement with our platforms, more engagement with our brand, at all levels of the funnel.
And I think then we start talking about sort of three key areas, don't we, in terms of where personalisation can really have its biggest impact.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's very much understanding, as I kind of mentioned there, it is at all areas of this funnel. I mean, you could probably put awareness in there as well, because you can look at that from a performance marketing perspective as well, but really it's engagement. It's driving more value through the engagements with the platforms, through the content, through the experiences and end-to-end. More meaningful actions in terms of the conversion point by personalizing call to actions all the way through to what a user sees as they move through that purchase journey, for instance, if we were to say e-commerce. And that retention piece is really important because people want to engage with a brand that they feel understands them. So it's really important that we layer in that and consider how we build customer loyalty through that platform.
And I wanted to come to you because I know we were talking about some of the work that for argument's sake, that Umbraco have been doing and what the platform can actually deliver across, for example, a number of these areas.
Yeah. This is actually one of the things that we were looking at earlier, but one of our clients who was implementing our personalization tool, and this is more just to speak to the retention element of personalization in general, they saw that their viewer retention on their website increased 183%. And what that actually led to them real business terms was a 600% increase in leads. So even, a relatively, well, we'll say that's like quadrupling your attention, but you're 6xing your leads. So it scales in a non-linear way, right? Like it goes up exponentially. The more that we're able to personalize these websites and get this engagement, conversion, and retention. On the engagement piece, I think there was the element of one of our websites had way more white paper downloads than they would usually had. So it's not just commerce sites. It's also things like corporate investment sites, these sorts of things,
Yeah, and that user experience is so important regardless of what type of site you're running, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think for me, when it comes to this sort of topic, and it kind of fits nicely to those examples we were talking about earlier, but also these various stages of the funnel, it is all around for us, enabling in the platform and the product, the removal of friction at each step of the funnel. And you can see that in the results that we've seen. Aaron talked about the rise in traffic, return traffic, but also leads as well. There's other examples of where we've seen, I've worked with clients on the removal of friction across the funnel from start to finish and thereafter. And there's an example of 25% increase in sales over a particular period as well, because I think not only is the percentage of leads increasing, because it is personalised, those leads are actually more qualified when they come through as well.
Yeah, and I think that in a world of the AI overviews and zero-click search is going to be so important. I know you're laughing because I'm talking about AI yet again in another campaign that gets on that. I've talked about it in the last 100 masterclasses now. But it is, isn't it? It's so important around how do you create that frictionless experience? Because I think we are seeing a world where there is less traffic going to websites than before, in the sense that people are being served with content at a zero-click basis. But then what's happening is we are seeing more qualified traffic arrive on websites because people are almost able to get a little snippet before they arrive. So I think then you've got to make sure that when they do arrive, having been qualified, that the experience also aligns with that.
Yeah, and I think even when you touch on things like AI overviews and even if you wanted to go down the route of Gemini, ChatGPT, that is all personalized results, personalized content. You can see how much it is entering into people's just digital experience overall, not necessarily even on platforms. So that's why that level of expectation is so high.
And I think one of the things that we always want to talk about, and it's worthwhile looking at sort of in the chat as well, is please do register as you look at this. But we do often like to offer something sort of free to all attendees of the masterclass. So for me, if you want to learn more about personalisation and the personalisation opportunity for your website and your digital real estate, that's one of the things that the team here in support with our partners would really love to look at for you. So as I say, what we'll do as part of that is review your existing digital experience, highlighting where personalisation could add the most value, where there might be easy, quick fixes, where there might be drop-offs, where there might be challenges, but really some of those hints and tips from a user experience that are going to really drive that value. So if you're interested in that and you're listening in, whether you're on catch-up, whether you're watching live, then by all means do click in the chat, register your interest, and we'll arrange that consultation as we move forward. I guess what the process we go through then, Johnny, is really important, isn't it, in terms of identifying that opportunity. So I think that starts with understanding your audience.
Yeah, I think the first key part of this is understanding the audience, but not necessarily. I mean, a lot of the conversations I've had in the past, understanding audience focuses on demographic. It focuses on device type, and that is fine. We can level and start there as how we want to view and understand how somebody engages with our platform. But for me, the most important sort of areas to look at are the user's intent and actually why are they here? What do they want from this? And that in turn shows us where we can add value to the experience, their behavior, because not everything that they say they want is what they actually want or what they actually do with our platform, when we've all seen where that frustration can arise, so we can get a good view on that. And then for me, a really big one is value. If somebody's values are focused around, if, I'm going to use another example here, but it's, if we were buying something online e-commerce, your values may sit around the speed in which you get that product versus mine might be price. So people's core values change. So we need to make sure that we're changing messaging, changing USPs, changing approach for those users, because therefore we're removing friction points and helping people move through that journey a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I think the masterclass we did actually last week was focused very much on understanding customers, what did it mean in terms of turning from data in dashboards into actual insight and actions. And I think, so that was one of the statistics that was flagged there. Only 42% of companies deeply understand their customers. I think that's an incredible statistic. But again, you think about that in terms of organizational capability to really do that. But the impact that doing that can have is absolutely massive in terms of selecting the right channels, selecting the right types of content, selecting the right user journeys. I think is absolutely crucial. And then what we do is we come from there, really identify what the opportunity is if we get those things, the fundamentals built out really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can then understand your audience and then start to understand the journey that they're taking through the platform, you'll easily identify some areas for personalization. It is areas we can remove friction, areas we see challenge, areas we see users begin to highly engage with us, but maybe not driving through to conversion. We touched on it before, that there's barriers through that whole journey. But this is where you'll see that opportunity and really where you can start to identify some of those key aspects that you could dive into with personalization.
Yeah, Jake, have you got, obviously you're looking at platforms, not just for MediaWorks, but across the sector. So have you got anything to add on this?
Yeah, and I really like this approach and how you positioned this here today, because I think one of the stats you showed in the previous slide, and I'll get to this section in a second, is the fact that there's a big sort of portion of organisations that don't fully understand customers. And I think what we've seen quite a lot often, and I've got an agency background before Umbraco as well, was that quite often companies and businesses were looking to, well, in that classic scenario where waiting for perfect get in the way of starting to be good today. And I think layering it in this way, in terms of you can do things and start with sort of demographics and high-level personas to at least look into what the quick wins could be, learn from those ones. And it's about layering in the behaviour piece and things that you touched on, Johnny, which then reveals the specifics around, okay, what specifics are going to have the biggest impact. Now we've looked at the quick wins, longer term, how can we really sort of move the needle on personalisation and therefore conversion thereafter?
Yeah. So then if we're moving that forward and we're then putting personalisation in play, there's some key things, Johnny, that we need to be considering as part of that process.
Yeah, and for me, this is a repeatable process. It's very much understanding the data that you have to play with, whether that's in-platform data, whether it's looking at your performance marketing data, whether it's looking at your first-party data that's coming through phone calls into a call center. It's really understanding the data that sits behind our audience, where we can identify challenges, barriers, and needs and drive and intent. For me, that's then sort of hypothesize and prioritize. For me, it's think of all of the things that we could implement on a website. And you're absolutely right. We could look to implement 100 and wait a year to go live with all of those things, or we could look to do one or two and prioritize those and go live in a month or two. And it's really about making sure that we're taking those small steps forward. For me, that prioritization sits around how much impact will it have for the user? Is the data aligned to what we think it is? And are we confident in that solution? Always versus that development effort or effort to implement, because the last thing we want to do is, wait 6 months to implement something that we may see some value on.
I think this is the bit that blows my mind quite often when I think of some of the work that we get to pitch for, or clients that we engage with in the initial stage. How many people build a website and then don't have a plan for constant iteration and improvement, and that improvement, incremental gains, if you like, the 1%, compounded up. I think for me, that's such an important element of making sure you've got a future-proofed website. And I think we've often talked about, as you say, a really clear 3-step, very basic roadmap there around review the data, then hypothesize and prioritize, and then make sure we then have a rolling roadmap about, let's implement one thing, let's implement the next thing, let's implement the next thing. Because I think a lot of people start with an amazing website once it's built, but then what happens is 3 years later, very little's happened on the website. It hasn't moved with the times. What you've then got is you've got a rebuild job on your hand rather than an iterative thing that you can keep moving forward. And I think, like, for me, that's one of the things that definitely all of the big platforms, you know, again, I've used the WordPress word, but I've used it, but like WordPress, Umbraco, any of those places, is you are speaking a lot about that, aren't you? About how it isn't just a one and done, it's an iterative process. So we want to make sure we future-proof that side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important, and I'm glad you put it, because I think what a lot of people want to do with personalization, because like, let's be honest, like constantly having to improve on something is almost like a way of admitting like, oh, we're not there yet the whole time. And so it's like humbling as an experience to go, we did all of this work and like there's still more work to do, right? So people would rather just be like, oh, we'll do a bit of personalization at the beginning, find some insight. Oh, cool, we've got it sorted. Users change, behaviors change, time moves forwards.
Yeah.
There's constantly more stuff and like a deeper rabbit hole to go down. And if you're not just constantly working on this and changing things and doing new things, testing new things, you're going to be left behind ultimately. And so you need a good policy around that, a good sort of test, build, repeat, test, build, repeat, test, build, repeat kind of cycle thing.
And I think then that leads us nicely on to sort of CMS, AI and delivery, Johnny, around sort of, again, why making sure you've got the right CMS in place, why these decisions are going to drive that iterative approach over a period of time.
Yeah, and I think you touched on it perfectly in the last piece there around almost setting yourself up for the future. So many web projects have been worked on and then potentially left behind for 3 to 5 years, and then we step forward and try to make a big change again. And really what you should be thinking of when you're looking at your digital estate, looking at the CMS, is actually how are we going to build this into a rolling experience that constantly improves over time. And I think that's the key piece for me, is a lot of personalization can be CMS led through sort of whether that's the foundation of your CMS or whether it's the add-ons and the packages that can come with that and the ability to bring into that, whether that's adding AI tools or agents into the platform that you have available through search, through all sorts of different functionality. But for me, it's that forward planning of knowing that, as Aaron's just put there, is knowing you're not finished when it goes, like, there needs to be this forward plan. And almost if you bake that into the knowledge at the start, then you're in a much stronger position to know that that just keeps rolling.
Yeah, and Jay, I'd like to just ask you some of the features that we talk about, like, we talk about segmented content delivery, sort of behavior-based experiences, etc., that Umbraco actually allows. I think that's a really important part of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, to be honest, the main reason why Umbraco Engage as an additional part of the Umbraco sort of product suite was released, because I think historically we have been extremely sort of CMS focused and CMS based, which will always continue. But I think in terms of meeting the market's needs in terms of user behaviors and how that's evolving over time, it is personalization and it is preference based, and it is hyper focused on conversion that we were talking about before in terms of the pathways to that. A lot of work goes into it, so conversion whilst landing is key. And yeah, A/B testing comes as part out of the box of Umbraco Engage. Personalization off the back of personas and reporting analytics is obviously a key part of it as well. And it's something which we've found over the last few months since Aaron and I have joined, but in the past as well, is really resulting in some great results for multiple lines that we touched on before as well. So I think it's only going to grow and it's gaining great momentum and really does match with quite a lot of what we're talking about today for sure.
Yeah, and I think that leads us so nicely to one of the final sections around measuring success. I think it's so important, isn't it? Like, how do you actually measure success of user experience? What does all of that actually look like? And because for us, we are a performance-driven agency. That's where we started. That was how we were founded. Like, came out the performance phase into websites and creating, etc. But we're always talking about, if we're going to do something, we want to know that it's actually adding value, making sure it has the right impact. And I think, like, that for me is one of the conversations we're often having about digital assets, is around whether a website, whether an app, whether it be created, is like, what impact is it actually having? Because you can always do something, but it's actually, what are we actually driving towards? What are we actually trying to see on the back of that? And I think, Johnny, it's so important, isn't it, that you have that measurability, especially as you're reporting on what can often be quite substantial outlay to, for example, a board or other stakeholders internally. You want to be able to really shout from the rooftops about some of the amazing statistics and findings and performance drivers that we've seen as a result of some of these changes.
Yeah, and early in that process, when you are hypothesizing and looking at the data, you're going to be working through the data that gives direction. That, for me, forms the foundation of how we then can measure success, because you are looking back on that data and doing a comparison, really working through in terms of where have we gone, what have we implemented, what value has that brought. And for me, the measuring of success really closes the loop on why we're doing this. It really then builds confidence in the approach and the long-term approach of where we can add these incremental changes. And for me, whether that is really looking at the bottom line and saying conversions went up, actually we could be looking at engagement. We could be looking at, we could really sidestep this and go reduction in call center calls and things like that. Like, it can really be key metrics where we're adding value through the types of content that we're sharing and the route that we're putting people through, can have massive effects on other areas of the business as well. It doesn't always have to just be a solid metric link to the website. Like, there's so many different ways that we can measure this, but for me, we always round this off by saying it's never done. And the more you build confidence through reporting on that data and seeing success, and success may be positive or negative, you're taking learnings and moving forward. For me, as much as we're reporting on that, we can always see those continued improvements throughout the experience.
Yeah, and I think then the key takeaways, Johnny, is if you're approaching this, if you're thinking about personalisation, if you will be thinking about personalisation, it's why you're on the masterclass, but it's if you're thinking about how to progress user experience, I think so. We put 3 real key takeaways on screen.
Yeah, map your audience, understand your audience, understand them at a value-driven level in terms of where they see value and how we can give value and not add complexity to their experience. Identify the opportunity, link that back to data, understand how you would deliver a more successful experience or maybe a personalized level of experience, and understand what that implementation looks like. And then it's that measurability. It's always linked that back to the data, the impact that's been had, the effort that's gone into it, but actually what has that shown and how it impacts our end user. And I think that, for me, forms the backbone of how you can lead into this continuous improvement, utilizing personalization as a key factor.
Yeah, and I think underpinning all of that is having the right tech stack in place to be able to do this. We talked literally this morning about a client of ours who's looking at a website, etc., currently on one platform, takes up a massive amount of time to adjust content, upload content, like removing some of those frictions by having the right partner in place, the right platforms in place to allow you to do all of these things is so important. And it's why it's been so good to have you guys from Umbraco with us today to talk about sort of the product offerings, for how we've approached that, some of the examples that you've given. So I think hopefully people have taken quite a lot from that session. As we always say, we do have 3 takeaways in terms of if you are interested in learning more about personalization for your specific organization, want that tailored insights for your specific setup, conversation with the team here, then by all means, just register your interest in the chat. I think finally, I'd like to say, I have to get asked about whether these sessions are live, right? And that's the question I get. I think today we've proven that the session is live. We've dealt with multiple audio issues, and apologies for that. We will get it right as we move forward. It's a bit of a rarity, but we live and we learn. But hopefully you've taken loads from today's session and learned a lot. And thank you all for joining us for today's MediaWorks Masterclass. We look forward to seeing you in a future one. And thank you very much, Aaron, Jake, and Johnny. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.